We actually and they're not. Hello, everyone. Hello. Welcome. Thank you all for coming this evening. Just a couple of quick announcements from the History Center before we get started. Some of our upcoming programs. On October 25th, our all-vet speaker is Chu Lei. He was a helicopter pilot in Vietnam. On November 5th, we have the South Central Pennsylvania Genealogical Society. Speaker is Richard Conkle, speaking about an 1829 witchcraft case in Cadorus Township. So good for Halloween. For November 18th, that's our annual Articles of Confederation Day at the Colonial Courthouse. Always a lot of fun, reenactors, entertainment to see. This webinar is being recorded and will be available later on the York County History Center YouTube channel. And please see our website for more information on programs and to register. It's yorkhistorycenter.org. I'm going to turn it over right now to Scott Mingus for an announcement. Thank you.
Thanks. As you all know, tonight's kind of a special night because we're celebrating more than 20 some years of meeting for the York Civil War Roundtable. Kathy, if you come up for a minute, I want to ask you about the beginning of the roundtable, if you don't mind, just a minute. Well, I thought you got to talk. So tell us how the roundtable gets started.
Well, there's a gentleman named Michael Riley, and he was a reenactor, and he reenacted General
John Reynolds
for years and years. And he started our roundtable as the White Rose Civil War Roundtable in Borders in Spring-Spring, Borders Books and Music, that has since gone out of business, but it was in Spring-Spring Township where BAM is, or BAM Books a Million Bookstores. So we met there until 2005 when they decided they just didn't have the capacity for large groups to meet anymore. So with a couple of the other roundtable members, we went actually walking all through, asking churches and actually Martin Library in downtown York if we could meet there. And we ended up going to North York Borough Hall for 2 years. So we met in there until 2007. And then in the summer, they finally wanted us to move on. So we came here in June of, well, no, the History Center, which was then called the Heritage Trust, had since the you should have told me I had.
What's the anniversary?
No. So anyway, Jim McClure was actually really beneficial in helping us to, you know, Jim, the retired newspaper editor. They had an event here in June for the Confederate invasion of 1863, and they had a thing called Patriot Days. And Lila Foreman Shaw was the director of the Library and Archives back then, and they were doing a book. They were doing a book signing. Jim McClure was here, and I said, "Oh, we need a home." And Lila had actually gone to Borders and come to some of our meetings, so she knew who we were and that we were a legitimate group. So it was through Lila that she conferred with the people here in Joan, and she said, "Yeah, we'll take you on. We can partner with you." And our first meeting was October in 2007.
2007. That's what.
So it was 2007.
Well, let's hear it. Thank you, Kathy. That's great. On behalf of the roundtable, we want to thank Kathy for many years of service to our roundtable. So our plaque says the York Civil War Roundtable recognizes Kathy Creel for more than 2 decades of leadership and dedication on 10/18/23. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. So appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I sent a message to Fran, but he didn't pick up the message, so I wanted him to come. But... All right. Well, thank you very much. Back to you, Scott.
Welcome, everyone. Again, thank you, Kathy, for your hard work with the group. And thank you for all of you who are attending our celebration here of our anniversary. Just a reminder to those in house that we do have some refreshments in the back for you. But as we look to tonight's program, again, we also want to thank the History Center for their work with us to provide a facility over all these years. And also after the program, those of you who are here, we are going to have some raffle giveaways. So make sure you hang around for that. But as we look forward to next month, many of you who were here last November, we had Dr. Bradley Gottfried and Linda Gottfried. They spoke about the first part of this book, Lincoln Comes to Gettysburg. They spoke about the creation of the cemetery at Gettysburg. And next month, on November 15th, they're going to talk about Lincoln's dedication of the cemetery. So it's going to be part 2 of their talk about Lincoln and the Gettysburg Address and the creation of the Gettysburg Cemetery. Some of the questions they're going to look at is where did Lincoln go while he was here in town? And we know he stayed at the David Wills home, but where else did he go while he was here? Where did they have the speaker's platform? There's a lot of mystery, but they look at photographic evidence. They're trying to pinpoint where it was. So he's going to talk about that. And there's always been questions about whether people in the crowd applauded him when he was speaking. These are all types of questions that they're going to be answering next month when they speak. Just a little bit about our speakers next month. Brad Gottfried earned his PhD in zoology and served as a college professor and educator for over 40 years. He rose to the presidency of 2 colleges before he retired in 2017. He's written 18 books on the Civil War, and it includes through Savis Beatty, he's publishing a series of maps of various battles, which are very interesting as well for those who haven't seen them. He is also a Gettysburg town guide and Antietam licensed battlefield guide. Linda Gottfried earned a BFA and served as a graphic designer and development officer at several colleges and nonprofit organizations before she retired in 2015. Now spends her time as a sculptor and enjoying retirement. And several of her pieces have won awards. And they've collaborated on 2 projects. The first one was this one, Lincoln Comes to Gettysburg, and a book that is soon coming out about Lee's retreat and Meade's pursuit after Gettysburg, which they hope to have out next year. Tonight, we welcome back Scott Mingus, local historian, local favorite historian and member of our roundtable. And he's going to give us a presentation here in a moment. But we also want to make sure all of you know that one of his recent books with Eric Wittenberg, the first volume of If We Were Striking for Pennsylvania, recently won an award from the Gettysburg Civil War Roundtable. The Bachelder Coddington Award. They won that for this book. And as Scott told us, they're hard to come by. So if you want to get one, get them now tonight, because you're going to have problems finding the volume 1. So we look forward to hearing Scott tonight as he talks about the Battle of Hanover, not just the Battle of Hanover, but how Hanover played a role in the Civil War, and looking at things that people did in the town of Hanover. And to learn more about that, we're going to welcome back Scott Mingus.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the warm welcome, Scott. I moved here in 2001 from Cleveland, Ohio. Became fascinated almost immediately with the extensive history there is here in central Pennsylvania, in particular York County. And over the years, I've written a number of books on York County and the Civil War, and I've had people forever talk to me about, how come you ignore Hanover? And I'm like, I don't really ignore Hanover. I don't think I ignore Hanover. But yeah, I guess I never had written a book about Hanover, but although I have talked about it over the years. So I finally, at long last, during the COVID shutdown, decided I'm going to put a stop to the "you don't care about Hanover" discussion by writing a book on Hanover, which I now have. But I want to talk to you about not just Hanover, but I want to talk about southwestern York County as a whole. Here's 3 key takeaways from tonight. Number 1, did you know Hanover's politics were dramatically different than the area in which Hanover was surrounded? Whether that be Maryland, southeastern southeastern Adams County, or southwestern York County, Hanover had totally different politics. We're going to talk about why here in a minute. Number 2, often I read about Jeff Stewart coming to Hanover, and the impression I get, and sometimes people will even tell me this, But Jeb Stuart was the only Confederate officer to invade Hanover during the Civil War. Not true, we're going to talk about that as well. The other thing is, I often hear that the only United States Army military hospital established in York County was here in York. Not true as well. So we're going to talk about that as well as we go forward. This is Hanover, Pennsylvania. If you look here, Hanover's basic spider web existed in 1860, and this map still exists today, although now all this has been filled with housing developments and side streets, etc. So here's the York Road, Baltimore Pike, of course, Frederick Street, Carlisle Road, Abbottstown. This town, much like Gettysburg, much like York, much like Carlisle, Chambersburg, most of the towns in South Central Pennsylvania were transportation hubs, because almost all of them had a spider web or a network of roads that emanated from it. Hanover, of course, was no different. And we're going to talk about how this spider web, if you will impact the battle as we move forward. Hanover was a lot of things, but first and foremost, as the Civil War begins, Hanover's a railroad town. There are 3 separate railroads that come into Hanover at the time of the Civil War. The largest and the one that's most often used was the one that went to Hanover Junction. That was roughly a 9-mile trip from Hanover, pretty much to the east, to Hanover Junction, where the Hanover Branch Railroad connected with the Northern Central Railway being the main railroad in this area, running from Baltimore north to Elmira, New York by the end of the Civil War. The second and smallest railroad, if we go around the loop, was to Littlestown, cut over to a small little farming village in southeastern Adams County, and was predominantly for the local produce, local cattle, things along those nature we put in. And perhaps the railroad that was the single most famous that went into Hanover was the Gettysburg Railroad. Later part of the Hanover branch formally, but created as an independent entity in the late 1850s. Train station, I think, was put up in 1859 or so in Gettysburg. But this line, known collectively as the Hanover Branch Railroad, was commanded for most of its history, early history at least, by its first significant fundraiser and president, Abigail Wirt Eichelberger. Those of you from the Hanover area will be familiar with the term Eichelberger Center for Performing Arts on Stock Avenue. That's named for this gentleman and his family. So here is one of the first early railroad trains. Look at this train station. This was the first train station erected in Hanover. You can see some of the crew here, some of the kids from the neighborhood, etc., posing in front of the train. But it was really the advent of the railroad that brought Hanover into the modern world, if you will, because one of these things the railroad also brought into Hanover was the telegraph lines. In fact, Hanover had 2 telegraph lines at the time the war began. The first, owned by the railroad, was put in right there at the railroad station. In fact, the telegraph station was right on the back side of here. The second one was a private telegraph, the only private telegraph line we know of in York County, that George Grove and his brother put in to service their store. So if you wanted to send a telegram, you didn't want to go to the train station and pay the money that the railroad was charging, you could go to Grove's store and you could send a telegram, private message. They would relay it themselves to other networks as well. So we've got 2 sets of telegraph, 2 telegraph keys, 2 telegraph transponders, etc. in Hanover. But the first one, the one at the train station, is kind of interesting because the very first message to ever reach Hanover on telegraph was a news of the Republican convention in a place in just outside of Chicago, along the lakefront. So where Abraham Lincoln, who had an Illinois congressman that most people in York County never heard of, Abraham Lincoln had been nominated as the Republican nominee for president. So that's the very first message that we know of that gets tapped into Hanover. So again, you can just see this town starting to emerge from its agrarian roots and starting to get a little more into the modern world of transportation and communications starting to happen in Hanover. Now, I mentioned the politics in Hanover were quite different. Here's why. Hanover had a couple of newspapers, one of which was a German, heavily Southern Democrat-leaning newspaper. The Gazette, there was another newspaper founded called Citizen. The leading newspaper in town is one on the right. It's called the Hanover Spectator. It was run by a gentleman named Seneca Leader. When Seneca Leader died in the 1850s, he took the unusual step of making sure that his widow and his daughter kept the newspaper running. Kind of unusual because in those days in America, it was very rare to have a female-run newspaper and a female reporter as well working for said newspaper. Incredibly rare. In fact, as far as I can tell, the Hanover Spectator is the only female-run newspaper in the entire Commonwealth of Pennsylvania during the Civil War. And it's one of the very few that has female reporters. Again, it's the only one that has that combination, probably in the United States that I found. There's no males really involved, other than one or two guys that help out on occasion. Now, the deal with these leaders, though, is they were so impressed with Abraham Lincoln that they went door to door. And they would knock on your door. You're not planning on voting for Breckinridge for president, are you? Yeah, Breckinridge, the copperhead from Kentucky, the slave owner. Yeah, Breckinridge. You're not gonna vote for him, are you? Well, most of the people in Hanover are like, yeah, we're Democrats. Oh, no. You want to vote for him? I'm gonna put your name in the newspaper tomorrow morning, call you a copperhead and a traitor to the United States. Who are you gonna vote for? And the next thing you know, people are like, I don't really want my name in the paper. I don't think that's a great idea. All right, I'll go with you. I'll vote for Lincoln. And so this leader, look at this. This is a map of York County in 1860 election. All the blue dots are Democrats. Almost all of them are for John Breckinridge. There are very few votes in York County for Stephen Douglas, the Northern Democrat. Most people vote for the Southern Democrat / Fusion ticket, which again is headed by, look there, Middle Hanover, right there, solid red. Why? Because this is leader scare tactics work. People are so terrified that they're going to go ahead and vote for the Republican Party. You know, a party that only existed at this point in time for about 8 years or so, had only run one presidential candidate before, John C. Fremont, 1856. And of course, most of York County voted Democrat for our neighbor, James Buchanan, across the river from Lancaster County. So the Republican Party did not have a very good start at all in York County. But this is leader delivering it. Now, if you look up towards the north, most of the people that live in this area are connected to Harrisburg and in turn connected to Pittsburgh. I used to see a lot of Steelers bumper stickers in this area when I first moved here. Carroll's barely Democrat, but most of this region is pretty solidly Republican. Just to get an idea, West Manheim Township down here, 2 votes for Abraham Lincoln, 174 for John C. Breckinridge. Which, as far as I can tell, West Manheim Township 1860 is the biggest blowout by a township in York County history in a presidential election. You'll often lose 174 to 2. You know, that's 98% to 2%. That's pretty heavy odds. The closer you are to the river, along in here, the more you're tied into Lancaster and on over here to Philadelphia. So again, Republicans tend to dominate the northern part. This is also somewhat ethnic because northern York County tended to have more Quakers, more Scots, Irish. Southern York County, very heavily German. And again, a lot of these people have relationships with Baltimore. Just to the south, of course, some 40 to 50 miles to the south of York County is Baltimore, Maryland. And a lot of these people have relationships, family relationships with the people there as well. Here's the vote totals. You look. Norris Township, Heidelberg, Jackson, here's Manheim, 174 to 2. North Cadorus, Paradise, West Manheim. You can just see how these townships, again, no support at all for the Northern Democrat Party and very little support whatsoever for the Tennessee candidate of the Union Party, John Bell. So again, you can just see how this region in Southwestern tended to be very heavily Southern Democrat. So obviously, Hanover kind of being the exception. It's the second largest town in York County, that still is. About 1,630 people mentioned. There's the vote, 218 for Lincoln and 133 people got their names in the newspaper. Some of them actually did, believe it or not. And if you go back and look at the Spectator, it was not an idle threat. Mrs. Leader, throughout the next 2 or 3 years, certainly slipped in a lot of names of people that she didn't agree with. Obviously, we're among those 133 people who didn't vote for Lincoln. Now, when the telegraph lines in Hanover and New York start buzzing with the news of the Confederate firing on Fort Sumter in April of 1861, all kinds of rumors start happening here in the border region. In particular, there's a tremendous amount of concern about Baltimore. You may know on April 18th and 19th, there were a series of incidents in Baltimore involving Union troops coming through. The first incident, Union soldiers are wounded. The next incident, the next day, soldiers are killed in what's now known as the Pratt Street Riot or Pratt Street Resistance. 6 Massachusetts gets clubbed and rocked to death. And so there's this huge concern about Baltimore. And rumors start spreading throughout South Central Pennsylvania that the Baltimore Rowdies, as this militia group from Baltimore was called in the early days of the secession movement in Maryland, they are going to come to Hanover and burn it to the ground. And there are solid reports. A body of men has indeed left Baltimore on the train, and they're going to Westminster, Maryland. And the presumption is they're going to march from Westminster to downtown Hanover and burn it to the ground. Well, so people around Hanover start panicking. There's one story, a guy named Ed Steffi is sitting on his porch with an old squirrel rifle, rusty old thing that probably couldn't shoot anymore. And somebody walks up to him and says, "What are you going to do with that thing?" And he says, "Probably won't fire." Then he puts a bayonet on it and says, "This thing's sharp, and I'm going to defend my property in effect with a bayonet." York, now there are 2 small home guard militia units in Hanover. They are both called out almost immediately when Lincoln calls for 75,000 volunteers. Turns out the Baltimore Rowdies are going to Westminster. There's no doubt of that. They are not going to Hanover to burn Hanover. However, they're going to walk from Westminster, Maryland, down to Westchester or to Westminster. From Westminster, they're going to march to Winchester, Virginia, and they're going to sign up for the Confederate Army. So they are indeed secessionists, but they're not trying to burn Pennsylvania down. Well, what this starts for the next 18 months in South Central Pennsylvania are all these rumors that the rebels are coming. Rebels are coming, the rebels are coming. You guys remember Chicken Little? The sky is falling, the sky is falling. People don't believe them, right? Nobody by 1862 believes that the Confederates are ever going to come to York County. There have been all these rumors, nobody's ever come, no problem at all. And of course, we're going to win the war anyway in 90 days. So all these guys show up. And then on July 21st, 1861, the attitude of the North changes forever at a place called Bull Run. And that is outside of Manassas, Virginia. U.S. Army is beaten. And all of a sudden, Lincoln now has to call for volunteers to serve for up to 3 years. So here are some of these guys that are starting to show up to sign up. Company G, 16th Pennsylvania, been organized under Captain Cyrus Dillard. They're going to go to Harrisburg to be trained. Again, after Battle of Bull Run, most of these guys turn around and sign up for the rest of the Civil War, or at least for 3 years in most cases. Now, throughout 1861, the summer and fall, recruiting here in York County is pretty heavy. Despite the fact that Southern York County did not vote for Lincoln, there's a tremendous number of people that are signing up for the Army. And my friend, Dr. Mark Snell, formerly with the George Tyler Moore Civil War Institute at Shepherd College, Shepherd University now, Mark Snell analyzed the enrollment records for York County. He is a York native, of course. Mark put down that the average enlisted man in Hanover was almost 24 years old. He's single, he's worth $343. The officers from southwestern York County are much older and much more wealthy. Why? Because in the early days of the Union Army, volunteer army at least, you buy your commission, typically in a lot of places, particularly here in Pennsylvania. And so guys with more money could end up, for various reasons, as the officers. They had more clout, they had more money to throw around to get the votes, and they end up becoming pretty much officers. But again, mentioned, everybody had calmed down about rebels. The rumors keep coming forever. And it's pretty boring, to be honest, the first few months of the war. There are heavy recruiting in Hanover, Nashville, and Thomasville. Those are the 3 recruiting stations in southwestern York County. But there's still these rumors. They still just keep flying around that sooner or later the rebels are going to come. Then all of a sudden one day people wake up and there's this massive fire just outside of Spring Grove, Pennsylvania. In fact, not terribly far from the paper mill that I worked for many years. Turns out that, and everybody by then is panicking, the rebels are here. They are burning the town to the ground. No, they're not. Turns out it's a farmer off Hershey Road who's out in his garage with a cigar and probably fell asleep in the hay or dropped it in the hay, whatever, and thought it was extinguished, and it wasn't. And the next thing you know, not only his barn burns down, but most of his farm and many of the adjoining farm buildings as well all burned down. But again, it just goes back to Chicken Little. People are like, you know, we worried that the rebels are burning a town, and they're not. It's not the rebels again. And so the whole idea just keeps falling apart. But they're, you know, the rebels, they're not coming. It's not coming. Yes, they are, folks. 1863, we all know Robert E. Lee certainly intends to come to Pennsylvania. Not a new idea. Back in 1862, during the Valley Campaign, a Confederate Congressman, Alexander Butler, who's on the staff of Stonewall Jackson, has been summoned to Jackson's tent. Jackson, knowing that Butler has some very powerful friends in Congress in Richmond, tells him, if you give me 36,000 men, I will take the war to the banks of the Susquehanna, i.e. Harrisburg, Wrightsville, who knows where he was intending, probably Harrisburg. Jackson has this burr that coming to Pennsylvania is the only real solution. As we all know, in the fall of 1862, Confederates do come into Fulton County and Franklin County on various raids. The Army's on its way here. It obviously will fight a battle at Sharpsburg and will not get to Pennsylvania. But that idea percolates throughout the winter that we do want to come to Pennsylvania. And rumors continue to slide, and nobody pays attention to them throughout the winter that the Confederates really aren't coming here. Jackson is dead by the spring of 1863, but Lee still has almost identical goals. Number 1 is to win a victory on northern soil. Why win a victory in South Central Pennsylvania? You saw the politics. South Central Pennsylvania is loaded with Southern Democrat-leaning people. There's a thought that if you can win a battle in that region, then perhaps these folks will rise up and force Pennsylvania's Republican governor, Andrew Gregg Curtin, to plead with Abraham Lincoln for Southern independence, or at least to start the negotiation process. That hasn't changed. Victory in northern soil is still Robert E. Lee's major goal. He does have a lot of other goals, which he does accomplish through the Gettysburg campaign, feeding his army, etc., breaking apart the railroads, turning troops away from Vicksburg. The entire Union Ninth Corps, including one of my ancestors, Ambrose Burnside, has them on trains heading to Mississippi to join U.S. Grant's army for the investment of Vicksburg. Those trains get turned around, and those guys are going to high rush it back to Cincinnati, and will be in Ohio as the Battle of Gettysburg starts. We're going to focus a lot of our attention tonight for the next few minutes on this guy. His name's Elijah Beers White. He's an interesting character. He's from Poolesville, Maryland. Elijah White has lived most of his adult life, at least in Leesburg, Virginia. He's been educated in Central Ohio at Denison College, Granville, Ohio. Went out west, fought against John Brown in Kansas, and bloody Kansas. Came back an ardent anti-abolitionist, believes heartily in the states' rights cause. And now, as the Confederates are forming new regiments and battalions, he forms one with 5 companies from Virginia, 1 company from Maryland. The 35th Battalion Virginia Cavalry will never be organized into a regiment. They'll never have enough men. But I want to give you a quote about this man because it'll point out the kind of person we're talking about. You're all familiar with Ambrose Pal Hill, of course. commander of one of Robert E. Lee's corps in the Army in Northern Virginia. In an army with Wade Hampton, Fitzhugh Lee, and Jeb Stuart, I offer you this analysis of Lieutenant Colonel Elijah White from the lips of A.P. Hill. White is a trump and the best cavalry officer we have. He thinks he's better than Jeb Stuart. He thinks he's better than Wade Hampton, better than Fitzhugh Lee. This guy is a very, very talented officer. Never probably heard of him because he never becomes a general, never even becomes a full colonel, because this little battalion stays a battalion throughout the rest of the war. And White's really good at what he does, so they leave him in that role. But Elijah White, we're going to talk more about him. Brandy Station, here's Elijah White. This is this great painting by Don Troiani, talking about the great Comanches. These guys are so good. They form these lightning raids. They have war hoops like Kiowa Indians. And so they're called the Comanches or the Kiowas in some accounts. They're not called the Comanches at this point in the war. They will be shortly thereafter. But White's going to lose a bunch of men at Brandy Station. He leads the charge that clears Fleetwood Hill of artillery and paves the way for Jeb Stuart to basically maintain some semblance of dignity at Brandy Station. With all this going on, everybody's now concerned about what was Robert E. Lee going to do. The Union Army's got to guard the roads to Baltimore. They're still down in Virginia. Most of the Army has either been sitting at Fredericksburg or at Centerville area, some in Manassas as well. But again, they're guarding the roads. That's their big deal. Now here in Pennsylvania, the governor keeps pleading with the War Department that you've got to send troops here because they're coming to Pennsylvania. And of course, Chicken Little. People are so sick and tired hearing they're coming to Pennsylvania. Even the War Department doesn't really want to believe it. So when the governor of Pennsylvania says, I need troops, how does Washington respond? They send one man, a major general, of course, Dryas Couch, who had left the Army of the Potomac out of protest of fighting Joe Hooker and had been replaced as commander of the Second Corps recently with Winfield Scott Hancock. But Couch, still a senior officer, comes on a train to Harrisburg. He's got some 57 or so U.S. regulars sitting in and around Harrisburg and not much else. And you got 70,000 Confederates heading towards South Central Pennsylvania. Couch's job is to buy as much time as he can to keep them there. June 15th through the 18th, Southern York County, here's reports of Confederate cavalrymen, mounted infantry to be precise, coming into two counties over, into Franklin County, and they're raiding the county. This is a part of Robert E. Lee's big supply raids that we were talking about. He'll actually eventually take 67,000 cows out of Pennsylvania that we know of, probably even more. And that's the point. If you study the damage claims and Confederate records, what little that still exists. These guys end up leaving, they turn around and come back. But what that raid into Franklin County does is it clogs the turnpikes. Everybody and their brother from Frederick, from Hagerstown, from Franklin County, Chambersburg, Greencastle, Marion area, they start fleeing to Harrisburg or to York because the two major highways in this region, Route 11 today, ran up through the Cumberland Valley to Harrisburg, Route 30, ran up and over South Mountain through Adams County through York. And you've got thousands of people on the road, including in Harrisburg. Newspapers report that somebody counted 1,800 Black refugees from Maryland and Virginia in particular, who then swept up before the Confederate Army's arrival, trying to escape across the Susquehanna. With all this going on, Abraham Lincoln, especially after he loses, he gets word that on June 15th, he's lost half of the Union division at the Battle of Winchester. Lincoln now says, I got to get 100,000 volunteers. I mean, come on, I need people. 50,000 of those volunteers are supposed to be from Pennsylvania, 25,000 from West Virginia, a new state who are going to be formed on June 20th, and the other 25,000 from Ohio. My wife's family joins up in the Wheeling area. My ancestors, some of them join up in Ohio. And about 50,000 of these people are supposed to be from here. Both West Virginia does their 25,000 volunteers. Ohio does 25,000. And Pennsylvania gets 7,000. We asked for 50, and we get 7. Why? Chicken Little. Rebels aren't coming to Pennsylvania. Maybe they're going to go to West Virginia. They don't want it to be a state. Robert E. Lee probably wants to take it back, so they're going there. Of course, in Ohio, they're like, oh no, they're going to Columbus. They're kind of split the North in two. So there's some legitimate scare tactics going on there. Here in Pennsylvania, they're not coming. We've been hearing this forever. They're not coming. We're not joining the army. 7,000 guys. That's it. Oh, by the way, just give you an idea of the 7,000 guys that show up. Charles Carson shows up in Harrisburg with 17 guys. They march through the streets of Harrisburg. Supposedly, 1 or 2 of these guys might have been from the Cumberland Valley and or York County, but most of them are from the Harrisburg area. They show up. They're marching through the streets of Harrisburg. They're using weird, strange military language. They're wearing white breeches that go down to their knees. They've got silk stockings on. They got blue swallowtail coats that go down past the rear to the back of their knees. They're carrying old flintlock muskets, and they're marching with music and drum beats that look somewhat familiar and sound somewhat familiar, but really aren't. And they're carrying a flag with 13 stars in a circle. Charlie Carson's 68 years old. He's the youngest man of the group. This is Company I, 1st Pennsylvania, War of 1812. Reconstituted, wearing their War of 1812 uniforms, carrying Charlie Carson's dad's flag that he had carried at Brandywine under George Washington in the American Revolution. Charlie Carson's men will become the only Pennsylvania unit, perhaps the only unit in America to get pensions from the Civil War and the War of 1812. So this gives you an idea of what's going on. Here in York County, there are some men to sign up, 75 guys from Hanover. Believe it or not, probably prodded by the newspaper lady, knocking on their doors, and they're saying, sure, we'll sign up for the Union Army, 75 guys. Show up on June 17th, they take the train to Harrisburg, and they join one of the 7 new Pennsylvania volunteer militia units, or emergency men, as they're often known. They're commanded by Hanover men. Again, some fairly significant names in Hanover at that time. So they're at least going there. Here in York, we get maybe 100 guys who are interested. They're going to march up and down the street in front of you where we're here with broomsticks. They don't have weapons. And so they're going to drill at least with broomsticks and sticks and canes and whatever else they can that will simulate a rifle. But they don't have any real ability to fight there. So these 7 regiments are going to be dispersed. In the case of 3 of the regiments, the 20th, 26th, and 27th, they're going to be sent here to South Central Pennsylvania, mostly to either Gettysburg or to York or to Wrightsville, where they're going to be guarding the bridge over there. Everybody else, the other 4 regiments, 4,000 guys, stay in Harrisburg. Well, Governor Curtin has had to swallow his pride, contact the Democratic governors of both New Jersey and New York, and bring in their existing state militias. They have standing militia by state law. Pennsylvania's law said we can only have a standing militia as a state only in the event of emergency. So if somebody's threatening Pennsylvania, we can form a militia. New Jersey and New York already had pre-existing militias that dated for decades before the Civil War, and you simply just activate them when you need to. They've been drilling, they have uniforms, they have arsenals, all that kind of stuff. Not true in Pennsylvania. So we had to rely on the New Yorkers to pretty much come help. But here's the Susquehanna River defense. If you look at the places I starred, the Gettysburg campaign and the threat to South Central Pennsylvania really boils down to one key fact. Can the Confederates get across the Susquehanna River before the Yankees can defend it? It's really that simple. And Governor Curtin selects, with Major General Couch's input, selects 3 key areas to defend: Gettysburg, Rail Crossing, Hanover Junction, where again the train that runs through Hanover comes out to meet the Northern Central. They also want to protect the railroad bridges. There's 2 bridges in Harrisburg, 1 bridge at Wrightsville, the next bridge is down here at Conowingo, Maryland. That's out of play. So we got to protect those bridges. Route 30, Route 11. So now you see why the Confederates are taking these routes, they're going for the bridges. and all the union has to do. There's also one ford, and only one, in the area that's between York Haven and Bainbridge, but it's underwater, well underwater, and you're not going to use that ford in the summer of 1863. But just to make sure, we're going to put 400 Union militiamen sitting here at York Haven just to make sure of that. June 22nd through the 25th, the Confederate infantry now starts arriving in Pennsylvania, and here comes the state militia. These are the boys from Hanover, among other places. They're going to take a train down through Hanover. They're going to have a giant party in Hanover when the train arrives. They're coming home. At least 75 of these boys are coming home. They have a giant party. There's bands playing. People are throwing pretzels and beer and cakes and pies and all kinds of stuff for the soldiers. They're having a good old time. Most of these guys have never been soldiers before. They're wearing bright, nice blue uniforms. Now they're coming back home and they look like heroes because the rest of the boys from Hanover haven't been home since the war began. So these guys are now the conquering heroes. Everybody's thrilled. They have this great reception at the train station that I showed you earlier in downtown Hanover. And then we're going to go off to Gettysburg. And the train hits a cow just outside of New Oxford. It's withdrawn, it derails. And they're going to, instead of walking the 6 miles to Gettysburg, they decide we're going to throw a party. And they butcher dress what's left of the cow, have a great party. They invite the girls at Gettysburg to show up, and they do. They have this wonderful time. And one of the boys from Hanover will later write, "This was the greatest night of my life. I mean, this is fantastic. I'm a soldier boy, party in my hometown, pretty girls, it's all good." That's June 25th. June 26th is going to be a little different story for our friends from Hanover. Why? Because Jube Worley's on his way. Jube Worley, commanding 6,600 Confederates. His job's to come into South Central Pennsylvania, Adams County, York County in particular, and the long, long rumored the Confederates are coming, the rebels are coming, are finally true. Here they come into a heart and soul of a region that's not prepared for their invasion. His orders are to destroy Hanover Junction, destroy the Northern Central Railway, seize York, ransom the town, go grab the, his orders actually are to burn the bridge. He decides on his own he's going to seize the bridge, enter Lancaster County, and he wants to hit Harrisburg from the rear. His orders are to burn the bridge and go to Dillsburg, which is where the concentration point is, the Army in Northern Virginia, if you read the ORs really carefully. And his memoirs, as well as other officers' memoirs. But he says the militia is so terrible here that I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to invade Harrisburg myself, as he later writes in several places. So Friday, June 26th, 1.3 inches of rain have fallen. State militia gets buried out of Gettysburg, 743 or so guys. They run like the wind. The state militia cavalry runs like the wind. Everybody's taken off, heading back to southwestern York County, to Hanover, heading towards York, places like that, trying to get to Harrisburg. Most of these guys are going to run smack dab into Richard Ewell up in Cumberland County, at least the ones that are trying to get to Harrisburg via that route. And there's our friend, Elijah White, who is the first Confederate officer to take Gettysburg. We're going to talk a lot about White, I mentioned earlier. So there's your trivia question. You can impress people for a Coca-Cola the next time you're in a betting mood and say, I know the name of the first officer to take Gettysburg. To you, Elijah White, 35th Battalion, Virginia Cavalry. This is Dale Gallen's fantastic painting. This is from actually a wayside marker on the square, downtown Gettysburg. You see the muddy streets, people panicking. Here they come, riding in. Again, Elijah White right here. And 35th boys hooting and hollering as they come into Gettysburg. They're going to have another battle at Widmer Farm. Colonel Jennings is going to lose 175 guys up there, including most of the guys from Hanover. So those boys from Hanover that had ridden the train, that are having that great party, that are so happy the night before, are now prisoners of war. And Jube Worley will actually parade some of these guys under the streets of Gettysburg and then call out the townspeople and will berate some of these Hanover boys and other state militiamen He's captured, basically in effect telling him, go home to your mothers, quit playing soldier. You might get hurt. You know, just see old Jude with his sarcastic nature, talking about these guys. By the way, let's go back here. Wrong one. See that statue? There are 4 statues at Gettysburg to the June 26th fighting. That's one of them. That is not to the Battle of Gettysburg. We drive by it all the time on Route 30. That is the 26th Pennsylvania Volunteer Militia. And this guy is Henry Ward Shriver from Union Mills, Maryland, who is the model for this exact thing. There are also 2 monuments on Baltimore Pike and another one on Route 30 just outside Knoxland Ridge near the first shot marker that talks where the June 26th battle began. So here is Jubal Early. Here is John Gordon as the Confederates. Here's David Kendallhart, who is the town council president for Gettysburg. This is my neighbor, Bradley Schnell, here in York. Painted this great scene. Again, you can see the Confederates hauling down the flag. Gettysburg falls at 2 o'clock on Friday, June 26th. Now, a lot of the boys that have been at Gettysburg have retreated successfully to Hanover. When they arrive in southwestern York County, people panic in the streets of Hanover. There is a cannon that's evacuated from Gettysburg, brought to Hanover as well, and it shows up in the streets of Hanover. So now it's Saturday, June 27th. The Confederates do not want Gettysburg. It's not the place of concentration. Place of concentration is right up here at Dillsburg. So everybody leaves. One guy stays behind and dies of alcohol poisoning. And everyone else comes into southwestern York County. 3 separate Confederate columns. Here is our buddy Elijah White heading back towards southwestern York County. There'll be another campsite here along Route 30, and the bulk of the Confederates will camp at Big Mount in and around the East Berlin Road, Canal Road intersection. And the state militia, of course, desperately trying to stop them, runs away from the Hanover Junction and tries to head towards the river. Saturday morning, the Sherrystown, the last town in Adams County to fall, falls at 10 o'clock. They force at gunpoint Elijah White, kidnaps a Sherrystown man on the streets and forces him to take him to Hanover. They're going to roll into it. Allows it coming to Hanover. A local young German preacher by the name of Julius Kurtz spots the Confederate column. He's on a better horse and he goes riding into Hanover, screaming at the top of his lungs the words we've all come to disbelieve: the rebels are coming. The rebels are coming. To which Hanover's people are like, you know, this guy's never been known to exaggerate. I think he's right. So how does Hanover respond? The chief burgess of Hanover does not surrender the town. Nope. He's a Republican. What's he do? He flees, takes his horses, and he's gone. Most of the town council of Hanover, Republicans, take off. They don't want to get captured. There's rumors that they're going to capture the Republicans. I don't know where they came from, but those rumors are throughout at least southwestern York County. It leaves behind the preachers. Reverend Kurtz, other preachers of the Committee of Safety, the ad hoc group that they formed earlier in the war, they will now stand on the streets of Hanover. So the preachers and the other committee members are going to stand here in Hanover Square. Here comes Elijah White's men coming in down from Gettysburg. They're going to go straight for the train station. That's the first target in Hanover. Get the telegraph lines down, burn all the rolling stock that's in the area. Go search the warehouses. There's a huge group of warehouses back up here. There's also some warehouses right here that they are going to go pretty much take everything out of they can. So the rebels are now here. They're all throughout the town. They're going to come into downtown where Reverend William K. Seiber, who's a German speaker from the German Reformed Church. He will head the committee that will welcome, if you want to use that term, Elijah White into downtown Hanover. He's buying time because the telegrapher, one Daniel Trump, at the train station has taken this exact sounder here in the telegraph key back to his house on Frederick Street, has got some money and is skedaddling to Baltimore, trying to get down there as fast as he can. Why? Because the Confederates are taking telegraph operators. They're taking postmasters. They're taking federal employees as they come through South Central Pennsylvania. They're going on a shopping spree, Heilman's Clothing, Grove Brothers Candy. Remember Grove Brothers? That's the place that had the other telegraph pole. Confederates are stunned to find another telegraph there. And of course, down it goes as fast as possible. They go into all these stores, of course, the shoes. Remember the legend of the Confederates winning shoes in Gettysburg? Where do you think the shoe? What did it just do there? Hopefully it's back. There we go. They're going to Joe Holland's shoe store. He's going to lose an awful lot of shoes to the Confederates. This is A.G. Smith's apothecary right here. This building is a drugstore. Across the street is a hotel. Now, rebel officer, one of Elijah White's company commanders, walks in here and says, "I want whiskey." This guy's a teetotaler. Doesn't have any whiskey. He walks across the street because he's worried sick about this Confederate officer. Looks kind of mean. Goes across the street and he buys whiskey from the local tavern. Comes back into his drugstore and he serves the alcohol to this Confederate captain. Captain gets drunk, sits back, and has been riding in the saddle for days on end, and he is blitzed at that point. Well, while he's laying there, his men basically raid this entire store, take everything they can. Some of them are going to pay with Confederate money. Most of them don't bother paying at all. Schmidt is going to lose a fortune from this. Most of the merchants in Hanover lose money. Most of them. The stores are cleaned out. Elijah White's men are grabbing everything they can. Except for here. There's the blacksmith shop of Peter Frank. He's not open. But he lives right near the blacksmith shop. And a Confederate comes up to him and says, "I want you to open a blacksmith shop and I want you to shoe my men's horses." Peter Frank defiantly says, "I don't do business with rebels." He's been thoroughly indoctrinated by Maria Leader. He's a Lincolnite as deep as they come. Doesn't want his name in the newspaper. No. So Peter Frank's like, "I don't do business with rebels." Rebel taps the pistol 2 or 3 times. "I don't think you understood me. You will shoe my men's horses." And so Peter Frank dutifully, worried about getting his head blown off, fires up the bellows and starts shoeing horses. And then to his shock, the Confederate officer, probably James Anderson, pays him in gold. US gold currency. Everyone else is getting paid in nothing or in Confederate money, and this guy gets gold. He tells the captain, "I'll shoot anyone else's horses that has gold as well. Send them all here." At this point, Peter Frank makes a killing from the Confederate raid on Hanover. Everyone else's neighbors are probably really jealous that they got the Confederate captain who didn't even care, and he gets the Confederate captain who pays in gold. It's just, I guess, the fortunes of war. Now, the rebels are going to spend about an hour in Hanover, and then they're going to leave. This is Elias Price, previously unpublished picture that a friend of mine found and sent to me. But the rebels are going to ride out of town. Most of them, not all. Remember I said the stores were all raided. One of the stores in downtown Hanover has just advertised 2 weeks before in the Hanover Spectator, "New shipment of fine French wine." Oh boy. I don't think he had any bottles left, folks. The rebels are blitzed. Most of these guys are, drinking their fill. So what happens? You got all these drunken rebels lying around the streets of Hanover from Elijah White's 35th Battalion, and Reverend Zyber and the Committee of Safety go arrest these guys. And when they sober up, they take them back to the Union Army down in Westminster, and they're going to be made into prisoners of war. Leaving Hanover, the guys are going to, Elijah White's going to raid all throughout southwestern York County. This, of course, is Lake Marburg. There was a little village here called Marburg, long gone, but you can see Elijah White's exact routes. They're going to come all throughout southwestern York County, come to Hanover Junction, do the raid. They're going to eventually go to Spring Forge, and they're going to camp where the shopping center is today there. As they come through this area, the Elijah White's men start reporting about seeing Pennsylvanians who are waving yellow pieces of paper in the air, and they're crying out a secret password, "Peace, peace," and they're making secret weird hand gestures. Takes them a little while to figure out that there have been con men from New York City have come through southwestern York County, and all throughout the county, in fact. And for $1, they're selling them the bogus membership card to the Knights of the Golden Circle, a secret Confederate sympathy group that did not exist in York County. And the people buy it because they tell them when the rebels come, they'll know you didn't vote for Lincoln, they'll know you're a friend of the South, probably voted for Breckinridge, so show them these tickets, say the secret password, peace, peace, and they'll know you're a friend. Has nothing in the world to do with the Confederate Army. Confederates don't know anything about this and the whole thing. As it turns out, it's one giant con game from these con men from New York City who take the last train out of York back to New York. Jubal Early himself will write, these things are all new to us. The purchase of those mysteries have been badly sold. His men would have disagreed, though. I love these quotes. One of his men says, horses, sheep, spring houses alike. It was a picnic in Pennsylvania. They cried peace, peace most beautifully wherever we went. And so the rebels are just stealing what they can. They're going to go to Hanover Junction. They're going to chase off the 20th Pennsylvania Volunteer Militia, burn the bridges. They're going to burn the turntable back here. They're going to rack a lot of the rolling stock that are there. And again, who's doing this? Elijah White, 35th Battalion, Virginia Cavalry. There's Elijah again. There it is, the campsite. Look at that building. Recognize that? That's the Weast House, also known as the Hoke House. That's been in the news, wanting to be knocked down, now going to be preserved and moved to a new location after much consternation and fighting over the last few years. Well, that was what that farm would have looked like. This actually is Kenny's grocery store, right there where the barn was. This house still exists, that house still exists. So, June 28th, of course, now the rebels are coming into here. Southwestern York County finally gets a small break. Monday, June 29th, of course, some of the rebels are still moving to Dillsburg, where they thought they were going to be. The bridge has been burned. But look back here, 56 Michigans arrived at Gettysburg, and now they're leaving. And Robert E. Lee's got to change his plans. Instead of going to Dillsburg, everybody's going to start coming down here to Cashtown, Heidelberg area. So on Tuesday, June 30th, we know everybody concentrates and look at poor Southwestern York County. Just when they thought everything was over, here comes Jeff Stewart. Stewart rolls into Southwestern York County with about 4,000 to 4,500 cavalrymen and 3 brigades. They're going to fight a battle on the streets of Hanover, the largest battle ever to be fought in York County's military history. 300 casualties, pales in comparison to Gettysburg. Well, we've never had 300 casualties before in a battle in York County before it says. And again, this is a shock of war. Rebels are coming, now it's shooting. And Hanover becomes, as far as I can tell, the only town in the Gettysburg campaign where we have documentation of women shooting at Confederate soldiers from second floor windows during a battle. The women of Hanover are firing at the Confederate troopers as they're rolling through the Battle of Hanover. So again, notice this battle almost begins on the exact opposite. Elijah White came in this way from Adamstown and down from Carlisle. Now we've got from the south side of town here. Fighting happens when the 18th Pennsylvania Cavalry is pretty much split in two by some of Stewart's men from John Chambliss' brigade. And so we had this incredible fighting going on. Next month's speaker, like me, a graduate of Miami of Ohio, so I'm the warm-up act for my fellow Red Hawk. Brad Godfrey graciously lent me this map of the Battle of Hanover for the presentation. Jeb Stuart, his career almost ends at Hanover, almost ends. He and W.W. Blackford, one of his chief aides, are surrounded by numbers of either the 1st West Virginia or 1st Rhode Island Cavalry, maybe some of both. And the only way they can escape is to jump over this 15-foot wide, 15-foot deep tributary of Plum Run, called a ditch in some accounts, and off they go. Their ponies, being Virginia thoroughbreds, can easily leap over it. The U.S. government horses can't jump, and so Stuart escapes. A year later, way out in front of his troops again, at Yellow Tavern in Virginia, he's not so lucky. Hanover, his career should have ended, but they are able to jump this thing. Today, the ditch is still there, the tributary. It's certainly not 15-foot wide or 15-foot deep anymore, although it was at the time of the Civil War. Hanover also marks the debut as a general of this guy, George Armstrong Custer, really promoted from captain to brigadier general His first action commanding a brigade is in the fields in and around the Forney Farm, Forney Avenue, near Turkey Hill, at Hanover, for those who are familiar with the town. After the Battle of Hanover, they're going to establish a number of hospitals throughout Hanover, temporary hospitals. Again, you have 300 casualties, some dead, most of them saber wounds, pistol shots, etc. And so, as you can see here on the list, you've got all these different Army hospitals that are just temporary. Then the Army will actually establish a real hospital for a while. They'll take the Pleasant Hill Hotel, and Dr. Perrin Gardner, the 1st West Virginia, will be in charge of the hospital. Call your attention first, up here is Eckert's Concert Hall. That's one of the places used. This is Eckert's Concert Hall. This is the hotel. So if you're familiar with the Wareheim Mansion on Baltimore Street, directly across where the fountain is today, of that mansion is where this hotel was during the Civil War, right at the intersection near Pleasant Avenue and Baltimore Pike. Well, that will become the U.S. Army's formal hospital for much of the summer. There will be patients sent here from Camp Letterman. As Camp Letterman, as patients in Gettysburg are getting better, they're either sent to York or to Hanover or New York or Philadelphia or Harrisburg, Baltimore, wherever. Somebody eventually will go to Boston, but this will be the first stop for a lot of these guys. Will be the Pleasant Hill Hotel. Tuesday, July 1st, there's our buddy Elijah White again, to everybody now concentrating at Gettysburg. And where's Jeff Stewart go? Dillsburg, because that's where he still thinks the Army's supposed to be. He's not disobeying orders, he's doing what he thinks he's supposed to do, and that's go to Dillsburg and find Joe Worley. Never realizing Joe Worley's down here, and of course, so he goes on to Carlisle, expecting to find Robert Rhodes, and instead he finds Yankees under Bully Smith. Now, finally, guys in Hanover, you've all seen the movie Glory. You've heard about the 54th Massachusetts. We don't often talk about the white troops that are also fighting at Fort Wagner. It's more than just the 54th and 55th Massachusetts. In fact, a regiment from York County, the 76th Pennsylvania, has a lot of York County boys in it, is one of the regiments that's fighting at Fort Wagner. A lot of these guys were in the early 16th Pennsylvania that had been part of the Army way back at the first 90 days of the war. Now they're regular troops fighting in South Carolina. Hanover Junction will get a distinguished visitor. Some people believe this is Abraham Lincoln. This is his train getting ready to go to Gettysburg on November 18th to deliver the Gettysburg Address. I've got a lot of reasons in my book on the Northern Central Railway why that's not Abraham Lincoln, but that myth still persists, and a lot of people still believe it is here in York County, but I don't think it is. I think that's A.W. Eichelberger. That's the president of the railroad, and he's there to greet Ward Hill Layman right there, Lincoln's bodyguard. Lincoln will come to Hanover. Have you guys ever memorized the Gettysburg Address? Keep your hands up if you memorize the Hanover Address. All right, with your permission, Kathy, I'm going to quote the entire Hanover Address. Do you mind? Buckle down. It's a very lengthy speech Lincoln makes. Comes to the bottom of this and he says, I heard you had the rebels in town. You had some fight here last summer. Did you fight them, maybe? To which the people of Hanover stand in stunned silence. That is the Hanover Address. That's all that Abe said. Finally, somebody hands Lincoln an apple and everybody starts applauding. And they figure, okay, we don't know if Lincoln was joking or he's making fun of us or what. Yeah, we had a battle in Hanover. You know, does he know our politics? Does he know we're a Republican town? And then the train rattles off, leaving people to interpret what was this thing. A Philadelphia reporter says it was jocular and Lincoln was joking. Other reporters said Lincoln was scolding Hanover for you should have fought even harder, guys, at that point. But the result of the Gettysburg campaign is Lincoln gets smashed in York County, absolutely smashed in 1864. He's going to lose 2,000 votes from what he had in 1860. Point George McClellan's just going to rip them in York County. Well, give it again. There we go. Finally, in 1865, Liberty Lee will surrender, of course, to U.S. Grant, and the soldiers start coming back to southwestern York County. Finally, last act, of course, of York County during the Civil War is Abraham Lincoln's funeral train. Comes through the very area that did not vote for Lincoln, but all these Democrats all across the tracks in southwestern York County, lined the tracks in a rainstorm, black mourning clothes, hat in hand, talking about the fact that, we respect the office of the president, may not have voted for this guy, may not like his politics at all. We'll fight this war, but we certainly don't like him. But they respect the office of the presidency, and the tracks are lined in southern York County with folks mourning the passage of the funeral train as it goes through. Most of Hanover's Civil War dead are now lying in a circle around their Civil War monument, and not all of that cemetery. Ironically, way back in the background is where the Jeb Stuart's Confederate artillery had fired during the Battle of Hanover from the outskirts of this very cemetery. Hopefully in the last 50 minutes or so, you've gotten a little overview of Hanover and the Civil War. I got books for sale if anybody's interested in them. Maybe. Oh, there we go. Wait a minute. But we could take a quick break. Anybody have any questions about southwestern York County and the war? Yes, Carolyn.
Scott, where's that Whitmer house?
Yeah, the Whitmer House is off of the intersection of Table Rock Road and Goldenville Road. So if you take Table Rock out of Carlisle, go north out of Gettysburg,
Yeah.
go right. I think there's like a car wash or laundromat or something at the intersection. You go right on Table Rock, past where the old reenactments used to be. You'll hit Goldenville Road, make a right on Goldenville, and the Whitmer Farm's still there.
Is that marked at all?
No, not marked at all, but it's easy to find. It's the first house east of Table Rock Road on Goldenville. It's real easy to find. Been there many times over the years. Yeah, it's well worth it. It's pristine. I mean, the farm's still there. I mean, it's, a fairly pitched battle happens there. Nobody dies. The 175 guys were captured there at the Whitmer Farm. So great question. Yes, Kathy.
I was reading the index claims you have filed in the back of the book, and quite a bit of the losses are quite substantial. And I was just wondering, the claims are all denied, and what's the state of Pennsylvania, how they justify the fact that they never paid the claims?
Right. Yeah, after the Civil War, for those who aren't aware, residents of South Central Pennsylvania could file damage claims with the state or Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, 3-man commission, sworn testimony. In essence, if the Federals took your property, you could file federal claims, they got paid. If the Confederates took your property, you had to file with the Commonwealth. Most of South Central Pennsylvania was Democratic. Most of Pennsylvania's legislatures, including Governor John Geary, Gettysburg hero, after the Civil War, he's the governor after Curtin. They deny all the claims for the Democrats because they're like, you guys collaborated with the Confederates, we're not paying. And so legislature after legislature kept voting down the claims for this region. It was purely political. They would couch it in the newspapers as budget crisis, but it was really political. And nobody ever got a dime because eventually Pennsylvania just got tired of the bill. And there are people that still, I know lots of folks that still own these wonderful certificates that Pennsylvania gave them for the value of their lost horses, whatever, but they're worth a few $100 on the collector market, but that's about it at this point. Yeah, great question. Anyone else? Yeah.
How long was the battle?
Yeah, Battle of Hanover was basically a half-day affair. It starts in the late morning with 18th Pennsylvania being split in two at the intersection of Westminster Pike and Frederick Street. It's going to continue until about dusk, but most of the afternoon is just George Armstrong Custer and Wade Hampton's men exchanging a long-range fire, some artillery duels going on, people shelling each other over the town. A couple of the houses in Hanover are struck. Henry Weinbrenner grabs a shell, throws it out his bedroom, actually throws it out his door into his yard. It doesn't explode. And that shell is still in the collection of the Hanover Area Historical Society. So, the fighting, in essence, the fighting's over by noon with the street fighting, which is deadly. And most of the 300 casualties happen before noon. Probably 80% happen before noon. The afternoon's frankly pretty boring as Stuart's starting to pull out, and he's using Hampton just to shield the fact that he's got 175 125 captured wagons. Yankee wagons he's captured at Rockville, and so one brigade at a time, starting at 2 o'clock, then 4 o'clock, then 6 roughly. The 3 brigades pull out of Hanover, leaving them. So great question. Okay, Scott.
During other parts of the Gettysburg campaign and other areas, people were hiding their merchandise. Anything going on in Hanover?
Yeah, Hanover people were so like, keep in mind, Elijah White came on the 26th. He's somewhat unexpected. So White's men are taking a lot of stuff. A lot of Hanover residents have taken their goods to the hills. Some of them have brought things back, assuming the rebels are never coming back. And so Stuart's men on the farms in and around the outskirts, and there's a store right opposite now at Olivet Cemetery, they raid really heavily. And so Stuart's men are able to take still a pretty fair amount of stuff out of Hanover. But Stuart's men really get lucky when they hit the fully loaded stores in Jefferson and places like that. I mean, they clean them out because most York County merchants had already brought all their stuff out of hiding, put them back on their store shelves, assuming the rebels aren't going to come. And sure, I mean, all right, rebels are coming. They finally came, they're gone. Oh no, Jeb Stuart's now coming, and nobody counts on Stuart. And so there are 853 different families in York County filed damage claims, over 1,000 damage claims in total. Some are Elijah White and Jeb Stuart. So there's a lot of duplication of names, different things. But a lot of these poor farmers will read, lost 2 horses to Elijah White, lost 4 horses to Jeb Stuart, because they get careless again, never assuming they're coming back. Great question. Okay, Kathy.
Can you just tell us again about how many horses and cattle were still out of your account?
Yeah, York County, 1,150 horses, 75 mules, and over $250,000 in personal property taken out of York County. And if you figure that almost every one of these horses will either be pulling artillery at Gettysburg, or Stuart's men, or Elijah White, or somebody's riding on these horses. Next time you're at East Cavalry Field and you go out there and look at those fields and realize most of Fitzhugh-Lee's brigade, at least a big chunk of it, are riding on horses captured in Maryland or in Pennsylvania. They're not on the ponies they set out with when the Gettysburg campaign begins. Over 100 of Stuart's horses are turned loose in the field just outside of Jefferson. So a lot of the horses that they've been riding at Hanover are wounded, they're tired, they come up lame, whatever, and they're just ditched in Jefferson on the way north. More than 100 of Stuart's men are arrested here in York County, mostly in southwestern and northwestern York County, by the 1st Troop Philadelphia City Cavalry, who comes sweeping through here after crossing the river on flatboats on July 4th. They go riding all up and down York County, and they'll capture more than 100 of Stuart's men, almost all of them on foot, who haven't been able to steal horses yet to get out of Dodge. So, All right, thanks again. Appreciate it. Oh, Nicole.
Sorry. Couple questions
Sure.
online. Bill Landis just was
Hi, Bill.
asking, he said he's reading Coddington. You mentioned Coddington book. And is his work still the gold standard?
Yeah, Every Color in Gettysburg Campaign is a fantastic book. It's pretty dry in a lot of ways. I mean, you can read it. You better have a hearty dose of no dose. It's a fantastic book. It really is. It's pretty dry in places. But yeah, Coddington's really great. Our book, Eric and I wrote a 2-volume set called "For Striking for Pennsylvania," but it was inspired by another great book on the campaign called "Here Come the Rebels" by Lieutenant Colonel Wilbur Nye, written in the early '60s. That's the book that we wanted to emulate and frankly update and add modern sources and new things too. But that Coddington and Nye are kind of the standards in the Gettysburg campaign from our childhood years. Yes.
He's also asking about the electric map and if it's.
The electric map, yeah. Scott Rowland purchased the electric map from the Gettysburg, moved it to Hanover, did all the asbestos reabatement, rewired the thing, put in new bulbs, spent a whole ton of money, put it on display, and then got shut down by the borough of Hanover for various reasons, not the least of which was ADA compliance, because it's on a second floor of a building with no elevator. And so he's not allowed to have it on public display full time. over the last year or two, he has gotten permission for private events. And so every now and then, if you follow their Facebook page, the electric map is open to the public on occasion. So, but it's special schedule. So, yeah, look at the Gettysburg Electric Map in Hanover is the name of the Facebook page, I believe. Look at that and that'll give you the idea of the goal. Thanks. And with that, I will say good night to everybody. Thanks so much. Don't forget, Kathy's going to come up. We're going to have the raffle. There's food in the back. Carolyn, where are you back there? Carolyn Ivanoff and her husband Nick are in town for the train show. She happens to be a fellow author for Gettysburg Publishing. She's got a wonderful new book that I'm really looking forward to reading. So I bought a copy of that tonight from her on the 17th Connecticut in Gettysburg. Trust me, guys, this is a really interesting book. I've been able to pin through it several times. Yeah. Yeah, Coddington's not exactly unbiased.
And I like Trudeau too.
Yeah, Trudeau's really good, but he's not in the 60s. He's not a classic yet. He's becoming a classic. I mean, if I have the modern books, I prefer Trudeau over Sears and some of these other ones. Yeah, I definitely think Noah's really good what he writes. All right, thanks again, Kathy. I'll go back to you.
Now you're gonna help me. I think a couple gentlemen came in. Randy, I don't think you got a ticket.
Yeah, everybody stick around. We're gonna get off prizes
And John.
quickly.
I'm just want to. All right. You can come up right here.
Grab something to eat while Scotty and Kathy are doing this.
Thank you.
What's that? Yeah, sure. What's that? Sounded like that.
Let everybody, come up and pick your bride. So,